How can we make old story ideas exciting again? Because we've all been there, in that situation, where you have a really interesting story idea and a handful of characters, and you have tried to tell their story time and time again. You've written that first chapter a dozen times, and you've written that beginning. You've written that exact same opening sequence a dozen times, and now you're tired of it. You've put the story down, you've picked it up, there's something in there that drives you to write it. But it's just not working out. How can we make old story ideas exciting again? That is the subject of today's workshop. Hey there, my name is Max, also known as MKaren. In case you don't know, I do writing advice videos on YouTube twice a week, but every month I propose a series of topics to my patrons, and they decide what the main topic for that video is gonna be. I make that video, and they get to watch it a whole month. That's right, a whole month before it goes live on YouTube. If you like my content, or if you have watched my previous workshops or my previous videos, and you have a little bit to spare, consider becoming a patron today. Patreon.com/mkaren is the place to go, where you can get cool perks, like getting to watch videos like this one, the workshops, a month in advance. And if you pledge $1 that is just $1, you get to vote on the topic of the next monthly video, get to watch it a month in advance, and get to watch the rest of my videos, my Friday writing advice videos and my vlogs on Sunday, a week before they go live on YouTube. There's also a bunch of other perks, like the ability to get shoutouts in the end of my videos, early access to my books, signed copies of my books, and access to my super duper secret podcast, The Secret Life of Max, where I tell everything, and also access to my physical writing zine that is delivered to your doorstep every single month. So once again, if you enjoy my content, consider going to patreon.com/mkaren and pledging as little as $1 $1 a month. That's all it takes, just $1. $1 and you get to watch all of my videos before they go live on YouTube. But now, with that out of the way, thank you for listening. Let's begin now into the main subject of the video. You know the scenario. You have a story idea that you have worked on forever, that you know, that you have always been excited about. A cool, interesting story idea. And you've tried to write it. You have tried getting through that first chapter several times. And nobody here, and I can assure you, no one here hates rewriting first chapters more than I do. I hate going over words and scenes that I've already written out, because I always feel that I'm missing the original essence of it. So for situations like this, where there's a cool, interesting, old story idea that I want to revive and be excited about again, so that I can push through beyond that first chapter and all the way through. What do I do? What have I done? At the basis of this, I think the basis to reignite, revive that old story idea is grounded on 2 points. First, we gotta make it more fun. And I know, it's a cool story idea, I know! But we gotta make it more fun. And secondly, it's all about perspective. This here is an issue about perspective. As it says on the thumbnail, it's a matter of perspective. How can we make old story ideas exciting again? And for this example today, I'm going to talk about the story that I'm currently writing. As of the time of this recording, by the time it goes up live on YouTube, I probably have already finished that book, hopefully, fingers crossed. The book that I'm writing originated from an old story idea, something that I always found to be incredibly interesting, and which I had restarted first chapters over and over again, to the point where it's just exhausting. To the point where, like, you are halfway through that first chapter, you don't finish it, and then you're halfway and you go, this is not working out. I can feel that something is missing. And then you put it down, and then you pick it up 2 weeks later, and you repeat this cycle until you get exhausted of it. Or until, much like I did, I had to sit down and look at things from another point of view. So once again, rooting things on making the story idea more fun, because when writing is fun, you sit down to do it and you push through. Okay? I've finished a dozen novels, I'll tell you right now, if you're not having fun, you're not gonna finish it. So you have to focus on making it the most interesting, fun, exciting story idea to write. That's how stories get finished. So it's gotta be fun, and it's gonna deal with looking at things from a different point of view. The reality is that, especially if you've been down that cycle like I have, rewriting the first chapter where you think the story should start is not gonna work anymore. Because you've been there, you've rewritten that opening chapter so many times that you can almost recite it from memory, and that's not particularly exciting. And I don't think the readers would have a lot of fun reading that. So this is going to require a little bit of sacrifice. You want to make that story exciting? we're gonna have to move things around a little. And I'm going to begin with the one that is the least intrusive to the most intrusive, and how they all worked for me, okay? Let's dive right in. I have 3 ways of looking at your story idea from a different point of view and changing it to make it more exciting. And the first one is the simplest one of them all, the one that requires the least amount of changing. Let's find someone else to tell this story. Stories are told from points of view. A point of view is the perspective from which we look at the story. Even if the story is told first person or third person, there is a focus character, someone we're following most of the time, or several characters we're following most of the time. Regardless of that, there's a central point of view, an anchor, that anchors the reader to the world. And I said, this may seem like the hardest thing, but it's the easiest one of the bunch. We must find someone else. Look at your story, look at your world, and ask yourself, who would make telling this story more exciting? And I know what you're thinking, but Max, the main protagonist, the main character, I outlined them. They are the main character. Not anymore. This is drastic, because we need to change enough of the fabric of the story to push you through that first chapter again. We need to change enough of this perspective that it's Neo again. You cannot rewrite that first scene again. I can't write that first scene again. I would die of boredom. We must substantially change the story so that it's different. The story will be different while still maintaining the elements you care about. Again, we want to make this fun while still being the story you care about. Shifting the point of view is one of the easiest things to do, and one of the most effective things to do, because you get to keep everything else. And I'm going to tell you right now, some of the most fun points of view you can have. The 2 easiest points of view you can shift around is, 1, you know that a companion character, the main character, has had the whole journey? What if they were the main character instead? What if the companion was the main character? Also, what if the antagonist was the main character? What if we just shifted the entire story around? I've done that. And it's made for very interesting stories, because more often than not in a lot of stories, when you have an antagonist that is an actual antagonistic force, someone is standing in the way of the main character, you seldom tend to see them, or you have to see them in other scenes where they're telling you their evil plan or something like that. So putting them at the center of the story may not only give you perspective into who they are as a person and how they came to be, but it will give a completely different spin, because too many stories are about the heroes going out, marching towards the castle of the big bad guy, while the big bad guy sits at the throne and waits. What's the antagonist doing while I wait? What is it like to have control over the whole land? Shifting the point of view. You have the school world, you have these school characters, find someone else. And I know, it breaks your heart. It breaks my heart too. But sometimes when you have a tired, old story idea that has some spark in it, we have to change it a little bit. Now, there's something else to be said right here. There's something else to be said about the idea of changing the nature of the main character, and I think that falls right into the same point. If you like the main character as they are as a person, or in the situation they're in, move some things around, change a couple elements of their background. You don't have to do a completely drastic change, like write the story from the point of view of the antagonist, but little minimal changes, just to change enough of the setup that you can jump in there with fresh eyes and write new things. You don't want to rewrite that first old tired chapter again. I know I don't. Now, how did I use this example before? In the book, that by the time this video goes up, I've already finished. In that book, originally I wanted the story to revolve around a very particular theme of memories. And the main character would be this person in a position of power. Let's just call them a master. And the master would know everything. They would know everything about this world and the idea of memories. And I know I'm being very cryptic, but it's a cryptic book, it's fine. But that person knew everything. And the book will revolve around them teaching their young apprentice about the nature of memory and what memory meant in this fantasy world. And I remember brainstorming, and I remember starting, and I remember being so incredibly unexcited, because I was writing about a character who knew everything. And there was something in me, especially about someone who's so powerful and ancient, that it kind of becomes a little bit unexciting. And I realized the story was going to become a lot of just transferring the information the master knows to the apprentice, and that wasn't exciting to write. So what did I do? I shifted the point of view of the story. What if the point of view was told Or what if the story was told from the point of view of the apprentice instead? As they learn, as their own knowledge conflicts with the knowledge of the master, as their idea of memories conflicts with the idea of memories as presented by the master who knows about the way of the divine world. That little shift right there, from telling the story from the point of view of someone who knows everything, and the story is going to be all about just transferring information to the reader and the apprentice, which honestly wasn't exciting at all to me, suddenly became a lot more interesting when the main apprentice would have a chance to analyze the learnings and say their own point of view and express in their internal dialogue how they felt about it. So that's one way. Changing the character at the center of the story. And of course you can also extend it to changing more characters. But again, we're moving from small change to bigger change. Let's go to difficulty 2 change. You have this story idea, and you don't want to change the characters. And that's fine. If you don't want to change your protagonist and your antagonist, and you don't want to shift around the point of view, that's fine. We can work with this, okay? Here is what you do. You take where you think the beginning of the story should be, and you move that around. I would recommend, with all the power in my heart, to push you to move the timeline forward, mostly because I think it'll make for more exciting things. It'll push you into a realm where you don't know where the story should go, and I think right there is where the storytelling is the most exciting, when you don't know, and when writing becomes, as it truly is, the act of discovery, and you, as the writer, are the first story's reader. Move the beginning of the story forward. Forward. The example that I used for my book was that I wanted the story to take place in the middle of this feudal war. And I realized that it was going to eventually conflict, and especially through the writing, I realized it was going to conflict between the monologue I wanted to have, or rather the dialogue I wanted to have between the master and the apprentice, about the nature of memory and about what that means for this world. And I realized it was gonna conflict with the whole, they were also having a war going on right now. And trust me, in chapter 1 I realized it was gonna be too busy. So I thought, well, why don't we have the consequences of the war? Why don't we have the fallout of the war happen? Why don't we just move the beginning a little bit forward? Now you may be asking, why would moving the point of view forward make the story more exciting to write? Well, for my story, it created this new interplay, because sometime in the midst of writing, in the midst of telling the story, of actually sitting down, an idea struck to me. Since the story is taking place in the future of the war, and there is the party that won, and the group of people who were defeated, wouldn't it be interesting if the master and the apprentice were one from each group? The master is part of the group of people who won, who succeeded, who defeated the other party in this war, and the apprentice is part of the defeated party. This would also bring us another point of view entirely, and another conversation to have. What about the memories of the defeated? What about the nature of history being erased by the victors? That right there emerged organically, simply just by moving the beginning of the story forward into the future. I know, it seems counterproductive to think that the stuff that happens after the war, the fallout 10 years after, would somehow be more exciting than the actual war itself. But for this example, it worked out perfectly. And I had a lot of fun writing. So, again, sometimes, all you gotta do is just move the beginning forward in time. One of the things that I really like about moving the beginning of the story forward into the future is that it allows you, as the writer, to maintain knowledge of all the cool things you've brainstormed, of all the cool people and organizations and story elements, and you get to have all of those. And you get to have the repercussions and the consequences and the things moving forward into the future. You almost treat your outlining as the foundations for the story, and I think that actually works very well. You get to see characters that you were excited about older, hopefully maybe wiser, with the new characters that come into play. And it's almost like writing the second series of books from the start. And I think that's actually kind of an interesting way of making an old story exciting again. Write the next generation. I think that works. That is only the second out of 3 ways. There is one more. A very intrusive way of making an old idea exciting again. And this is the one where we're gonna have to put on our surgical gloves, because it's gonna get a little ugly. Okay? Let's walk in into the operation room, because the final way that I've used in the past to make old stories exciting again goes a little bit like this. Stories are made of many things. They are modular, and as much as we want to believe that they all exist intertwined like a chain tied up around itself, a snake that is forever eating its own tail, such is not the case. And if you've been through all this, and you look at your story idea and you think to yourself, I still don't know how to make this work, there is one final thing. One final thing. And as I mentioned, we're putting on the surgical gloves, because it's gonna get a little ugly. It's time to look at how stories really are modular. Stories are made of characters, and situations, and places. People, which are the faces of your story. Places, which are the stages in which the play takes place, and the actual events. The things that happen in the story that propel characters into taking action, making choices, and facing the consequences of both. 3 things in every story. People, places, and events. If you really like a certain character, if you really like a certain place, if you really like a certain event that happens, you can remove them from a story idea. I've been using the surgery analogy for a little bit, but let's be real, it's not that hard. You don't need surgical tools to do this. It's just a little ugly. Take the character that excites you the most, or the place that excites you the most, or the event that excites you the most. Take it out, and put it somewhere where it can actually flourish on its own. I've always been a person of less is more, and for my story ideas, I always like to begin with something smaller. Something smaller. Something smaller. Now, how did I work this out? Because I think I need to propose an example before, so that anyone else can understand what I'm talking about. For the story idea that I've been talking about this whole time, I used a combination of all 3, by the way. Of all these 3 methods, I've used all 3. I shifted the point of view, I moved the start of the beginning of the story way forward into the future, 10 years into the future after the war. Technically, 8 years after the war, but whatever, it's fine. I did all those 2, and then one more. Because originally that story, and it's great that I'm recording this, because when the story actually comes out, no one will be able to tell this was originally the beginning, but the story originated in a cyberpunk setting, in a futuristic setting, where memory and digital thought were one and the same. And I really liked that setting, and I thought it was very interesting, and that was right there from page 1. From page 1, it was the origin of that story idea. And as I wrote, and as I did more brainstorming, and as I failed, and as I scrapped first pages over and over again, and I began doing the other changes, I realized this here is the very last thing that is holding me back. Sometimes we get really attached to story ideas. Sometimes we get really attached to our time being attached to story ideas. You think to yourself, but I've spent so many days brainstorming characters, brainstorming worlds and things. I can't just throw them out. But you must. You must grab them and throw them in the trash, because sometimes you have to grab what excites you the most and get rid of the rest. I didn't need the futuristic world. I didn't need the struggle between sentient and not sentient life. All I cared about, really, was the idea of memories. What do memories mean to us as mortal beings on this planet of blue and green? And once I grabbed that nugget, of an idea, and if you want to think of it, think as a concept, and also the event. The event of a master and an apprentice talking about memories. What do memories mean to us as human beings? I took these 2 things, and I put them somewhere they would flourish. I changed the world to a feudal setting, with low tech, no longer was there any idea of digital thought. I established the scenarios where the conversations would happen. I came up with new characters. And suddenly, as I began writing, the words came to me. And the struggle against the blank page became easier. Because suddenly I didn't have all these things to worry about. And I just took what I cared about most in the story. It can be 1, it can be 2 things. And I found a place where it could just be its own thing. In writing, we often try to make a story about a lot of things. And the more that I write, the more books that I finish, the more I realize that less is more. Mostly because stories are going to change. And I'll tell you right now, I probably have a couple writing sessions left on this book before it's finished. But I can already tell that when I go back to revise it, it will change dramatically. Because that story is about memories. But it's also about friendships. And it's also about the people we fall in love with. And it's also about the things we leave behind. There is this shortcoming in outlining and planning where we think that the story is going to be about this thing and it's forever going to be about this thing. But the story changes as we write it, because writing is the act of discovery. We set sail for unknown waters, and next thing we know, we arrive at somewhere else. It's a place that is similar to what we thought we would find, but it's better. It's more fun, more exciting. And that's why we make change. That's why we facilitate the act of writing by finding what is the most fun for us, the most exciting for us, what pushes us to get up in the mornings and sit our butts on the chair and type or write by hand. That right there, so stories get finished. So, if you have tried shifting the point of view and that hasn't worked, or it worked in some ways, and if you move the beginning of the story, if you move the timeline forward or back, I've never tried going back into the past, mostly because I don't like it, but hey, you know what? If it works for you, it works for you, right? This here is just my advice, and what works for me. If none of that works, put on the surgical gloves, take out your scalpel, and cut out the things that actually excite you the most. This is not a matter of take out what you don't like. No, I've never been about that. Take only what you care about. Life is a big buffet, and you go and you grab exactly what you want. Life is too darn short to write anything, to spend any time doing anything creative that is less than what you want. Exciting, fun, pushing you to write. Exciting doesn't always mean happy. This story, which was incredibly exciting for me, is a very sad story that deals a lot with mortality and dying and what happens when we leave and the people we leave behind and the things we leave behind. Exciting and fun doesn't equal happy. It just means the things that drive us to write. So, dear viewer, if you have a story idea that you've been working on forever, an old story idea, because we all have many, and you've tried writing that first chapter over and over and over again, well, today I hope that maybe, just maybe, I gave you another point of view. Again, my name is Max, also known as MKRN. I do writing advice videos here on YouTube twice a week on Fridays and on Sundays. If you enjoyed this workshop and you want to see more, subscribe. And if you want to see them early, please consider going to patreon.com/MKRN. The poll for the next monthly workshop video is up right now, right at this moment. So if you want to go vote, all you got to do is pledge $1, and you'll get to vote on that topic and watch the next one a month in advance. I think that's pretty cool, and that's just for $1. You may think to yourselves, Max, $1 is nothing. $1 is a lot. The small, consistent donations mean the world to me, especially for a small channel like me. You may be thinking to yourselves, Max, $1 is nothing. I can assure you that $1 from you is more than I would ever get from one single person on YouTube. Small, consistent donations mean a lot. They really, really do. But again, for now, I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. And I want you to go out there to focus on telling stories, to focus on the fun, whether it is happy or sad. Probably sad, but that's okay. Go out there, write, take this story, let it consume you, and tell as many stories as you can.